Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds. It's okay, they're robots. They don't have souls. Hello, everyone.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And I'm Seth Porges. Wow, I'm supposed to introduce myself now. Sorry.
Welcome, Seth. And we just watched, oh my goodness, Point Break.
Point Break.
Sure did.
Oh, God, yes.
27 banks in 3 years.
Everybody freeze!
Anything to catch the perfect wave.
I'm not a crook.
Patrick Swayze.
Fear causes hesitation, and hesitation will cause your worst fears to come true.
Keanu Reeves.
You think I joined the FBI to learn to surf?
Point Break.
Adios, amigo!
Searching for this movie on Amazon Prime to rent showed me just how many movies there are called Breakpoint. There's a lot.
Really?
There's a lot of movies called
Whole lot
Breakpoint.
of
And
movies
there's
called
at least
Breakpoint.
two movies called... There's at least two movies called Point Break
Right.
as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys watch the right one of the
Right.
two.
We never actually, we just said Point Break. Obviously, 2015,
Right,
right?
the 2015
classic.
one, right? That's
everybody's favorite movie.
Yeah.
That movie is amazing. It's almost as good as the recent Total Recall movie, which I think is really canon
Yeah.
and definitive
I actually,
as well.
so I think what I'll say about 2015 is I only have seen it once, but I did appreciate that it's all like stunts. Like it's all like they're doing all these extreme sports stunts and stuff. So I felt like they got the spirit of it. You know what I mean? It's just a hard challenge.
It's a hard remake
you know?
to sell people on.
Yeah. It's like the Red Dawn remake.
Point Break as they already remade Point Break as the Fast and the Furious, and that was cool, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
do it
true.
again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Seth, welcome.
Welcome,
Before we
yes.
get started, I just wanted to ask you if there's anything you want to plug, who you are. Our audiences might not know who you are and what you're doing here and what your intentions are. You know, state your
Yeah, I
intentions
can't tell if that's
for
a
us.
backhanded insult or not, but I'll run
No,
with
it's
it.
not.
I'm Seth Porges. I'm the co-director and producer of the new Netflix documentary How to Rob a Bank. Before that, I made the movie Class Action Park that's on Max. So I'm a filmmaker, I guess.
You are. You're a very good one. I just watched How to Rob a Bank last night, and it's a fantastic documentary.
I haven't seen
It's
that one
wonderful.
yet, but I've watched Class Action Park probably 5 or 6 times.
Oh,
I love that one.
Oh, you're going to love How to Rob a Bank. You're going to be behind because the reason I picked Point Break here is Point Break plays directly into the plot of How to Rob a Bank.
You'll be surprised because I was watching this movie and I was like, Bodhi's kind of like Gene Mulvihill a little bit.
Or that too. I do love my Bodhi-esque characters, of course.
Yeah.
You know, the Zen poet outlaw with the heart of gold, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to start with asking what our relationships to Point Break is. This is one of those movies that it's like, if you asked me the first time I watched it, I'm like, it was just kind of, I was born with it, you know, like it was just.
I think I was late on this one, but I'd love to hear, Seth, what's your relationship with Point Break?
Yeah, I you know, it's one of those movies where you're at your friend's house when you're like 10 or 11 years old and you're going to either Blockbuster or something like Blockbuster and you're picking up this movie and you're watching it because you just seen Die Hard, you just seen whatever, and you're just like, man, this is awesome. You know, it's schoolyard, a little too mature for what you should be watching kind of movie, but the stunts popped, it's got action, it's got everything. And then you get older and you start to revisit these movies of your youth, and some of them hold up and some of them do not hold up. And what's absolutely amazing about Point Break is just how much this movie holds up in every single way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of, like, I mean, it's action movies and comedies from this era. You watch a lot of them, and there's just at least that like one regrettable line, that one like, did they have to say it like that? Did they have to do it like that? Point Break's got none of that. It's a movie where you like can feel really good about liking this movie, and it's a movie that just the stunts pop, the energy pops. You know, it's a well acted movie, but it's not acted in, you know, it's not grounded. It's not based in realism. It's this incredible, I think, like apotheosis of the 90s action cop genre, kind of writ large. And you have in this character, Bodhi, who Patrick Swayze plays, which is what makes the movie just so special. This culmination of the 90s action movie anti-hero, right? The Zen poet outlaw with the heart of gold, the poet bank robber, the guy who's, you know, more anti than hero, who you're really rooting for and you really identify with. And it's a movie that, I mean, man, it just rules, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it absolutely rules.
I was actually telling Dave before we record, like, just like you were saying, Point Break's one of those movies that, like, sort of has a reputation of being, like, the goofy adolescent action movie. But the more I watch it, every time I rewatch it, it's like I appreciate it more. Like, I'm like, this movie's actually really good.
And I get it.
It's really good.
On paper, it's a movie about an FBI agent learning to surf to infiltrate bank robbers. That sounds silly, right? Like,
but
that
also
sounds
awesome.
Yes, but you kind of expect a certain type of movie, like a cheesy 80s, you know, like, and this movie does specific things that I realize that kind of avoid that. Like, for example, surfing, they never do a action surfing scene. And you'd think like my
like
my
surf
brain,
ninjas, you mean?
right? And my brain immediately thinks
surfing with guns,
Yeah, with
like,
Uzis.
and you kind of expect that to happen because you look at other movies,
That's true.
like, I don't know, Gleaming the Cube, where it's like, okay, we have so much skateboard stuff in this because it's a skateboarding movie. This, it never does that, and then it's such an efficient action script. Like, I was writing down the time codes and like realizing how quickly they're able to do these things.
Pretty rad script, yeah.
It's really good. When
it's fun. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned a script. I've gotten to know the screenwriter from this film. You know, who we started speaking quite a bit after How to Rob a Bank came out, and just like an hour ago before this recording, I shot him a text. I'm like, I'm doing a podcast about Point Break. Do you have any stories I can share? So I've got some inside baseball Point Break stories straight from the horse's mouth as
Sweet.
well.
Oh, I'm super excited to hear
if we haven't. We've established a little bit, but your documentary, it talks about Point Break a lot, just because he is very much like Bodhi, and it sounded like he was inspired by Point Break to some extent.
Yeah. I mean, the movie How to Rob a Bank, it's on Netflix. It's about a bank robber who literally watched the movie Point Break and then became a bank robber and started the first robbery. One of his accomplice wears a Ronald Reagan mask. The whole arc and trajectory of his story is really him living out this Point Break fantasy, and it's a story. I'm so obsessed with about Point Break is the romanticism of the outlaw life that the movie kind of puts forward. Like, it's viewed as a way towards enlightenment. Like, even his name, Bodhi, is like a reference to Zen Buddhism and enlightenment, and this person who kind of gives others enlightenment. And the character journey between him and Johnny Utah, Keanu Reeves' character, is really about like Bodhi giving him enlightenment, no matter what side of the law they're on. And the real life Scott Scurlock, who my movie How to Rob a Bank is about, is somebody who this idea really clearly appealed to. You know, the line, that famous line in the movie, which I wrote down here, so it's not from memory, I promise you, but he says, "It was never about money for us. It was about us against the system, that system that kills the human spirit. We stand for something to those dead souls inching along the freeways in their metal coffins. We show them that the human spirit is still alive." And so Scott Scurlock, he sees these speeches, these monologues, hears those lines, really absorbs it. And he begins to, I believe, view bank robbery as, in some ways, a path of, if not enlightenment, at least total freedom, right? A way of doing whatever you want, of living outside society. He wasn't a surfer, but he was he lived in a giant tree house. He was an adrenaline junkie. He really did this. He lived the Bodhi life. But what happens when somebody does this for real is really the central question.
I was going to ask, did he watch the whole movie before he decided?
Yeah, did you watch the whole movie? It's like the people who say, like, when I was in high school, we used to always joke that all the people who kind of like idolized Scarface,
Right.
must have gotten a 2 VHS tape set and lost the second tape.
Yeah.
But so my movie, I say it begins as Point Break and it ends as Heat. So he walks into it with this very romantic notion about what it means to live this outlaw life, and ends, I think, feeling the consequences and the isolation that comes from living a double life and a life of crime, which is not a problem that Bodhi has to deal with. Bodhi has friends. Bodhi has house parties. Bodhi serves. Bodhi is always doing fun things. But in real life, living the criminal life is extremely isolating, extremely lonely. And I love how Point Break paints this romantic notion. You just hope that people aren't stupid enough to take it literally.
Yeah. Well, because they still have the escalation, right? There's always this in all these bank robber movies. There's always the moment where they say like in Point Break, they're like, they never go to the vault. They're not greedy, and immediately in your head like, oh, they're gonna get greedy, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like they're gonna
Chekhov's vault, right? They're planting that seed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
With Bodhi, it's almost less about greed, and it feels more about the rush, where it's about him escalating, getting sloppy, because like the part where they have the street chase is because Bodhi starts torching that car, and everybody else is kind of like, come on, let's go.
Right, it takes way too long setting the cars on fire.
And it's not out of sadism or greed. It's more just because he's getting a rush out of it. At least that was my impression. That's like...
Yeah, dude, he made a flamethrower out of a gas pump. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, if I did that, I would savor it too. Of course.
I would probably scream and immediately drop it, and then everything would explode, and then I'd be on the news.
That's a good point. I would, I'd want a practice run, a few practice runs. But...
I do like that about Bodhi, where he is just kind of, we mentioned the casting earlier, or maybe that was Dave and I talking about the casting before.
This is such good casting.
But like,
oh yeah,
like Patrick Swayze, like Bodhi is just what Patrick Swayze would be like if he was kind of evil, right? Because like I think we do see that with Bodhi, what you were talking about, where the romanticism, but then the reality of what living the outlaw life is. We do see that, like obviously toward the end, when it's sort of you realize that it's kind of, he does believe it, but kind of just for himself. Like it's really just bullshit a little bit. Like he's not sentimental about the guys. He discards them. He uses Lori Petty, his former girlfriend, as a hostage. He's just, all of the layers of his bullshit strip away the more he's backed into a corner, until you realize, oh, he's just all about himself. He's only ever been about himself. So there's, I don't know, but you also feel what he's saying, right? Because there's this tragedy to him, because you feel what he's talking about, but it's like, it's so doomed, right? Like it's what we want to be. We all want to be. We can't do it.
Yeah. Well, he's chasing that dragon. He's never going to catch it. Like that's the irony, the tragedy of being an adrenaline junkie, is you have to constantly raise the stakes and raise the stakes and raise the stakes. And if you're an adrenaline junkie whose chief way of getting their fix is being a criminal, that's extremely dangerous, because you just have to keep raising the stakes, making it more challenging. You got to go for the vaults. You got to start doing the things you said you would never do. And just because you've been lucky like 20 some times, your luck's going to dry out at some point.
Right.
And that's what it, and that's, and
it's essentially
being an adrenaline junkie. Yeah.
Oh, I play a lot of poker. It's the same principle as gambling, which is like, yes, you can play it safe, but you'll never make that much money. You have to take risks in order for anything to actually happen, right? It's the same, feels like the same idea. It's the use of Patrick Swayze, because when you think about the roles he's played, right? Dirty Dancing,
this is like
and
Evil
then
Dalton.
Roadhouse. Yeah, and it's like he's a guy who can fuck you up. And we've had him in these romantic, charming roles. It's the same with Keanu Reeves. He's a surfer dude, and he's a cop. And it's like, well, what better road?
He's
like
graceful, and that's the chief, like Patrick Swayze energy to me is always like grace. Like he's got that kind of dancer physique, a dancer movement. Even he did some of his quite a few actually of his own stunts in Point Break, including some of the skydiving shots.
Yeah, there's that one
And,
The
shot.
Adios Amigo was famously him. Yeah. That's an awesome shot.
Absolutely. That long shot jumping out of the plane. And you look at the way he moves there. He's doing like ballet moves kind of like in the sky. It's really elegant.
Yeah.
And then you look at Roadhouse 2, which I kind of view as a 1-2 punch with this movie of like philosopher professor Swayze movies, where it's this guy he's kicking butt, but he's like spouting these maxims and adages about what it means to be enlightened, whatever it is. And they're both kind of very similar, I think, poetic characters. And that to me is peak Swayze, sort of the Roadhouse Point Break of it all. This idea of this person who is talking like a fortune cookie. And I think at the time, these movies, both of them, you're probably kind of, people were dismissive of them. Roadhouse in particular was viewed as just like a bad 80s B movie. But you watch it now and you're like, this movie is incredible. And that energy is very, very intentional. And you walk away with just so many like things the movie just implanted in your head. It's just such a non-disposable movie for a movie that on its surface feels like an 80s B movie.
Yeah. I mean, again, a lot of it for me comes down to the writing with both. Like, back to the writing of this movie, it's everything. So, like, 11 minutes in, what I love is that there's conflict baked in. And what I mean is, like, you have those first scenes, you know exactly who Johnny Utah is just by his first scene where he's like this yes man, then grabs the donut. So it's like, okay, he's kind of full of shit, but he lives to please. You immediately set up this conflict with Gary Busey about like Busey doesn't really want to do this anymore. He's burnt out, and that's the kind of thing that in any other movie you wouldn't include. But there's like this mini conflict right away between these two partners that 11 minutes in is like resolved, but you're watching it, you're riveted by it, and then we think this guy's a surfer, his crazy idea. And that's 11 minutes in, and they keep introducing these conflicts like that, which also kind of gives you an idea of Johnny Utah's character. Like, he pushes everybody he comes into contact with. Lori Petty, again, it's another conflict. Teach me to surf. She doesn't want it. She thinks it's a line. I love, and then you get about 23 minutes in is when I clocked it, is like, you know who everybody is. You know everything about what they are in these really cool, efficient ways. It's just...
I think we've even met War Child at that point.
Yeah, I forgot where this started. I'm just geeking out about the script because I love structure.
Yeah.
I love when they, like, it's these little things. I love
structure.
I love when they're like, who is Lori Petty? And they look up her record, and you know exactly what kind of person she is from the record, where it's like, okay, indecent exposure, a lot of driving stuff, like she's another adrenaline junkie. And you're like, got it.
Yeah.
And they do so good with like the idea of this guy learning to surf,
but roguish too, right? Like, it's none of them are serious crimes.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. She lives outside society, but she's not hurting anybody.
Right.
You know, it's like the noble outlaw, the one where you don't have to be afraid of her, really necessarily, but she kind of does her own thing. Yeah.
The idea, introducing the idea that he has to learn how to surf, like that's such a silly idea. They do it in two scenes, and you're totally with them, which is he goes to buy the surfboard, and the little kid is like, never too late,
So
man. He's like, I'm 25.
And
So you
lit up by
immediately-
this kid.
And it immediately establishes like, okay, this is a tribe. This is something that you do when you're a kid. And then just talking to Gary Busey, and he says like, look at them out there. They're literally like a tribe, and you're like, got it. Like two scenes.
And then also they get the ridiculousness of it where where Gary Busey's like, look, it's either you or me out there on the board.
Yeah.
Like,
And you believe it.
which
You
are they
never
gonna
question
buy?
it.
And it's great you called it a tribe, because there is this, like, coming back in time to the 90s, a little bit less than the 90s, certainly in the 80s, there was this, like, exoticism about surfers. Like, they were viewed as these foreigners or these aliens, these, like, otherworldly creatures that were kind of fetishized in the media, but you didn't know them as real people. And so part of the promise, I think, of this movie was, like Johnny Utah, infiltrating the surfers, was you, the viewer, kind of infiltrating the subculture that you wouldn't have access to. And it's kind of happens in a lot of movies in the 80s and 90s. Like, a very different example is the Billy Friedkin movie Cruisin', which was sort of, Al Pacino infiltrating, like, this homosexual BDSM subculture, and it's sort of like, you know, this sense of voyeurism to the viewers, kind of seeing this world they wouldn't have access to. And Point Break, I think, is similar, where this idea of like extreme sports, it's not just surfing, there's skydiving, there's pictures of him rock climbing, he's just an adrenaline junkie in general, was really, you know, this is before we had like the X Games as we know them, but this was kind of coming into fashion, becoming a thing marketed towards children, Cowabunga Dude, all that kind of stuff. And there's this sense of exoticism to it, and romance to it that the movie really leans into.
Yeah.
But also I like that I think Point Break is the only movie that sort of quote unquote accurately depicts surfing. Like, like it's like most other movies kind of lean into like the Spicoli version of a surfer, the Sean Penn in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Just, you know, like, oh, bro, like basically a laid back, easygoing person. But like,
which when Keanu Reeves is cast, you kind of expect it to be. I mean, this is Ted from Bill and Ted, and he even makes a joke early in the film when he's like going undercover, and it's like, why don't I just get stoned and hang out, you know? And
why
like
can't
that
I just
sort of
hold the surfboard?
Get stoned and hold a surfboard. And it's like, nah, man, you got to do this for real. And I think that's sort of the movie, like nodding respect to these people as athletes, as people who are actually doing hard, difficult, and kind of interesting work as well.
For sure.
Yeah, and it is kind of a little bit like Gangs too, at least what I have read of surf culture.
Right.
And this is kind of like the only movie that really shows it like that. Anyway.
Yeah. No, this makes it seem way more dangerous, I guess, because every surfer is doing something. There's a whole bunch of Nazi surfers, which I just realized the guy from Suburbia's in there. I love Suburbia. They're one of the kids from Suburbia.
So is Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers. Kiedis.
I was reading, doesn't he get like knocked out? And I was reading because they like all the actors were doing their own stunts and he was the only one who did show up for the training. So they're like, all right, you'll just get knocked out, I guess. Cause,
IMDb trivia. So Swayze did a lot of his own stunts. Again, coming back, I was talking to Peter, the screenwriter on this film, and he was telling me that Swayze actually, you know, he probably could have stayed at like the Four Seasons during filming or had his own private beach house or whatever it was, but he stayed in a beach house with all the other surfer actors, right? Some members of the Dead Presidents, some of like the surf technicians and advisors, they all stayed in this like beach house. It's like, if somebody had been filming that thing, that would make an incredible documentary, you know? This other, I mean, why? So, you know, one of the stunts Swayze didn't do because he's not stupid. You know, the very, very end of the film, you have him kind of surfing off into the sunset, right? Never to return.
Right.
And so the production, that whole scene was like a late stage reshoot. The original ending didn't have them fighting. It was more kind of like an honorable samurai ending is how Peter described it. But then one of the producers was like, there has to be a fight here. There has to be some conflict. So months later, they bring him back. And by this point, Swayze's hair is short and Keanu's hair is long because he's filming Bill and Ted 2. And Swayze was doing City of Joy where he played like a doctor or something. But it actually worked out well because it showed them kind of switching positions in many ways where their hair had switched. And it kind of marked the passage of time as well.
Yeah, that felt intentional.
Yeah, it was total accident, right? And they kind of captured this shot of Swayze surfing off into the sunset, and they paid some surfer $50,000 to take the wipe out on that giant wave.
Wow! I was sitting there thinking, man, how did they do this? Like that must be some kind of effect because you wouldn't put a person out there.
No, $50,000. And this is sort of before the birth of modern big wave surfing. Now you have documentaries like 100-Foot Wave, and there's this whole culture around just finding the biggest, gnarliest waves you can. This was, it wasn't until a couple years later, I think like 94-ish, that jet ski surfing really became a thing where you could use the jet ski to kind of get the speed and the momentum required to take on these massive, massive waves. So up until then, at this point, they have this conversation, I think it's around a campfire in the film, where they're talking about big wave surfing being like a death wish. Like, you don't do that. You don't mess with these waves. And that was absolutely the case at this point. But a couple years later, it would become this thing that humans would do, but they had no idea at the time.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. It's a great setup, obviously. Like that happens fairly early in, and then it's perfect ending. Did it still end? I assume it still ended with the Australia stuff. You're saying the fight itself was
there was just no like fight between Swayze and Keanu. It was more like, yeah, sure, go off,
the movie's it's funny because it's the pacing of an action film. It's sort of that the first 20, 30 minutes you have to set everything up. And I loved how much conflict they add. There's just a certain amount of energy in everything that you kind of forget even when there isn't that much action. Like Gary Busey. Watching Gary Busey is like watching an action scene. Like he's perfect for this. It's so high energy. But I was just noticing that sort of use of trying to put any moment you can have some sort of conflict. They added it in, and so I can see that mandate on the beach of they should at least fight here.
Right, and the way the fight ends too seems like a culmination of the arc. So it just fits so nicely. I would never have guessed that it was a reshoot, because the way he beats him is by letting Swayze almost drown him, and then he comes up and he's handcuffed him. It's that's kind of how he beats him in the movie.
And this movie, when you watch it multiple times, as we all do, because it's a great movie, it's a movie that reveals so many setups and payoffs in this film that you just don't even capture. Even the way the movie ends, and it's raining, they're in Australia.
Yeah.
The very first shot of the film is Keanu soaked in rain, in Quantico and training and whatever else. There's, shots when they're at Bodhi's house long before the skydiving, when you're seeing shots of him skydiving. You're setting up, this guy skydives. It's just a really, really tightly Swiss watch constructed script.
Yeah, I mean, they start with Bodhi surfing and Keanu training their passion, so to speak.
Yeah.
And Bodhi doesn't really have, he doesn't have too much of an arc, but by the end, you slowly, I really like watching it this time, Johnny Utah's sort of arc of because it feels like another stereotype, which is the grizzled cop throws his badge away, but it feels very earned in this in a way more subtle way than I had remembered. Because I forgot that it's funny because I can't remember a time where I didn't realize it was Patrick Swayze who was the bank robber, but the movie wants you to kind of not know that until the halfway point. It's silly to imagine.
I wonder about that. Yeah, because you imagine the marketing probably gave it away.
I remember the trailers.
The poster gave it away.
Did.
Yeah,
the trailer does give it away.
Yeah, and it's such a disappointment. I try to see movies cold without watching any trailers or absorbing any marketing materials, so you can kind of go along with the ride, because we don't allow ourselves to feel a sense of surprise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder though, if somebody had never seen Point Break or heard of it or seen a trailer, if they would be surprised when it's revealed it's not actually, the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Friends. Robin
right. I think it depends on how many movies you've seen, right? Because it's just well, why else is Patrick Swayze here? Introduce 20 minutes in, oh, that's Bodhi. And it's just gee, I wonder if he robbed the banks.
The bad guy,
yeah. And so the movie, I don't know, it doesn't matter either way. But I was going to say, with Johnny Utah, I always forget that there's a period of time where he thinks it's not Bodhi and he's just hanging out. He's just surfing. And then, of course, him and Lori Petty have this relationship, and then he's late to his own raid, and that's when you see it slipping.
Right,
where it's he's never lived for anybody else. They work in the football star stuff really well, and you realize he's just always done what what was expected of him. Yeah, and this is the first time he's doing something for him.
Yeah, the thing I can't get over in this film is, so he was a football star famous enough that these people knew who he was, and he's undercover but still uses his real name.
Yeah,
it's that to me, I was he's just saying his excuse is, I'm a lawyer now. I have clients. But it's when you're going, it's such a bold move to put somebody into an undercover position who was sort of famous and people recognize, and to still use his real name.
Yeah.
And the movie kind of, has so much going on that you don't really think about too much. But that to me is just kind of funny, honestly.
That is really funny. Yeah, I had never thought about that before.
No, I'm too busy thinking about Tom Sizemore's undercover job. I love him in this. He just looks like an undercover cop. Yeah, you think I like this hair? It's such a good line.
Maximum Sizemore energy, is he always looks like an undercover.
He got the tattoo. Yeah, he's just so angry. He's I got a stupid tattoo as part of this. My wife misses me. You ruin all of this. Yeah,
I think this is why I think one of the secret sauces in this is Gary Busey, because Busey is he's this grizzled cop who's been working for so long, who's got that Gary Busey energy. So you get this feeling of it's kind of a crackpot plan because he's just sort of like this wild-eyed dude, like, all right, here's what we're going to do. And so, like, yeah, it is silly that he's just, like, keeps his name and doesn't, and it's like, yeah, it just feels like, yeah, they threw it together. Like, John C. McGinley is not wrong when he's mad at them.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell are you doing? This is the silliest plan ever.
He's also got one of the most like memorable and distinct names that anybody's mother has ever given their kid, which is Johnny Utah.
Johnny Utah.
So if you're watching ESPN2 once 4 years ago and seeing this guy on like, you know, playing the Rose Bowl, which is what he apparently did in the film,
right.
You're never forgetting that name. And you meet some guy's name is Johnny Utah, you're like, whatever happened to this guy? Like, oh, it looks like he's been training in Quantico. You know, it's just... It's I think about like The Departed, where, you know, Leo goes undercover and all the work they have to put into to create like a backstory,
right?
Because like recognizing that, yeah, these people will know that he was in a police academy. They'll know this. What's the excuse? What's the backstory? In this, there's none of that. He's just like, oh yeah, just don't tell anybody you're in the FBI.
I mean, cool. It's the days before internet, so maybe we're taking that for granted. Where it's like, yeah, what are they gonna do? Yeah, like
it's not like they were gonna go to like the courthouse and look up public records on him, probably. But
it is still funny.
Yeah,
it's funny how little they're thinking about the internet that he can just use his name. There's a certain point. I love the point. This is another thing that I realized happens way earlier and I had forgotten. I knew that he knew it was Bodhi at the halfway point. I forgot that like pretty much right after that, Bodhi knows he's an undercover cop.
Yes.
And there's this great, I love that moment, that standoff, because it also feels a little silly because it's like, okay, Johnny Utah knows Bodhi knows, and then Bodhi's pretending like he doesn't know. I assume to like throw him off his scent, but he very quickly, you know, they go skydiving, and it's like, why would you go skydiving with this man in this moment? Like, you know, he knows, and he's acting like he doesn't know.
Well, he's threatening him, right, without saying it. Like, he knows he has to go with them. He doesn't have a choice.
Does he?
And at that point, point, both of them know the other knows, and it's like this unspoken thing.
They showed up at his house in the middle of the night with 4 dudes. Like,
yeah. Exactly. Right. Like that's intimidation.
Yeah,
right
I
there.
guess he doesn't really have a choice.
No.
Yeah. But it's still very funny to me. Because just don't pack a chute. You're done, Bodhi. That's all.
And I love that they do the shell game with the parachute too in the airplane. Yeah. That's a fun scene.
That is really good.
Yeah.
It's funny because like you said, they show the skydiving earlier, but that's another scene that I always imagined, like, I forget happened so late. Yeah. Because it's like, they do 2 skydiving right after each other. Yeah. But it works so well for the fact that, they both sort of know the other knows. It's the tensest thing to do.
Yeah. Another thing I always think about Point Break is Hot Fuzz, of course.
Where,
never seen Point Break? You never seen Bad Boys 2? You know, and the shooting the gun while laying down in the river kind of shot. I mean, that, iconic, man. The scream of anguish and existential angst, the realizing that the one person who you ever related to or loved is actually the guy you've been chasing. And the thing I love about this movie, and I think it's such an energy movie. It exists, all of the main characters, especially Swayze, Keanu, and Busey, they all exist as like avatars of these energies. You know, it's like it's not a movie grounded in realism. It feels somewhat mythological. It's a movie about the struggle of somebody's soul for enlightenment, but grafted onto this crime film, a crime film that's executed with some of the highest technical levels of its era and its genre. And it's a movie that like sits in you and bangs around in your head because it feels mythological. You know, Bodhi isn't, you mentioned before Bodhi not having much of an arc. Bodhi's not a person. Bodhi's not a character. Bodhi is this like idea, right? Like he's this Zen Buddhist avatar that, surfs in Southern California. He's this Mensch, this like perfect Superman who's good at everything he does, is charming, is charismatic. He's not a person, he's an idea. He's a character. He's like this ball of energy. And I think the movie, once you start looking at these people less as humans, is a really, really interesting movie, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
He's like that sort of like doomed, tragic feeling that we all get from time to time, where you just take a step outside yourself and just look at sort of the way the world works now. And it's like, why did we do this to ourselves?
And he's the one who's reached enlightenment, like throwing away like the third act of the film where they kind of have to kind of close the circle. He is, he isn't a human. He doesn't have an arc. And then Keanu's character is sort of the tabula rasa, like the uncarved slate, like this ball of wax, this ball of surf wax, I guess. In this way. Yeah. This piece of clay that is looking for guidance, is looking to be melded into something. And, he's somebody who, whatever his initial path was, playing football, that was cut short. He's thrown into this new path, and it's a path of law and order. And, it's not a coincidence. He's falling into the path of societal norms. It's the FBI, G-men. Like, it's the most normie norm job you could possibly have, right? And it takes somebody who's living outside of society to kind of instill him with this feeling of enlightenment. And it's kind of vague what that enlightenment is, like rob banks, surf, whatever. But it is just about searching and not accepting that whatever you're told there is all there is. And earlier in the film, there's this couple lines from Keanu where he's talking about this. It's very similar to some of the lines in Fight Club, actually, which is a couple years later.
I was going to bring up Fight Club, yeah.
Yeah, this realization that you're living somebody else's dream. You're doing what somebody else told you should do. And, and Keanu's character is somebody who's very explicit. I'm doing what I thought I was supposed to do because other people told me I was supposed to do it. And Swayze's character is supposedly giving him enlightenment away from that. But I think there's also a reading that he's just somebody else giving him somebody else's dream for him to kind of ape and mimic and parrot without really having much of his own.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Tyler Durden, frankly, because it's the same idea, which is like this sort of enlightened person who's waking you up, but then you sort of realize they're full of shit too. Like they have, like, you realize that everybody kind of has their own hang-ups and their own issues. I like that the firing the gun in the air, I always thought of as a moment where it's like, it's not necessarily that he it's like he's realizing there's a gradient to the world that he didn't see, where it's like he doesn't want to, he still wants to like arrest Bodhi. He just doesn't want to kill him, where he realizes that it's like, it's not black and white anymore. And it's like that, it breaks his brain in that moment.
And that's such an interesting dilemma, because I think, modern sober-eyed individuals would say, like, well, of course the FBI doesn't want to kill the person, they want to arrest them. But this movie exists within this like tableau of 80s and 90s action movies where you really get the feeling, no, the cop wants to kill the bad guy. And he's looking for any excuse to do it.
He threw a dog at him.
He sure does.
Yeah, he threw a dog at him. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of moments in this movie where the FBI just opens fire for really almost no reasons. And it's sort of acceptable because this era of action movie, it is so black and white, good and bad. Those bad guys got to die. How many like Stallone or Schwarzenegger movies kind of exist within that morality. And I think it is sort of interesting them trying to almost break free from the morality of the genre that the film exists within.
Yeah, I think that is a key part, because it does. I think that's why people think about this movie as like, oh, it's a silly 80s action movie or 90s action movie, because it is presenting that way and on purpose. Like that chase is he throws a dog at him. It's very fun. It's that thing where it's like, okay, you got to shoot it with drug dealers. Well, legally, you have to have at least one naked woman screaming. Yeah. Like that's just the rule of this era. I love that woman who takes down
needs
like
at least like a. Yeah, these movies needed nudity, and typically the way in, especially like if you're a Beverly Hills Cop movie, is just to have a scene in a strip club for absolutely no reason. Yeah, it's like, we're gonna meet in a strip club for no reason, and that didn't happen in this movie. And I think that's good. It would have really not jived with the reality of this film or the character. So instead, it's when you're raiding the bad guy's compound, there's some woman in a shower. That's your excuse.
Love that they don't expect her. She throws down like an Evil Dead deadite. She just like goes after like I love that. It's like
she's also in Roadhouse. She's Ben Gazzara's girlfriend.
That's great. Yeah, it was a great use of that. And then the lawnmower in that scene. That's great. Because that's one where you think the lawnmower served its purpose. Oh, they can't hear each other over the lawnmower. And then here it comes at the end of that sequence. And you're like, oh, we're using every part of the lawnmower. That's awesome.
I love
we haven't really mentioned Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Good. I love the way this film is directed. Just like all the motion in the beginning when we're with the surfers. It's the thing I really noticed this time is that the camera's moving a lot when we're with the surfers and the thieves or the ex-presidents. But when it moves over to Keanu and Busey, it's like stationary and dull. But like eventually as the movie escalates, like she stops filming the ex-presidents this way. And less romantically.
They lose their glamour.
Yeah, it loses its glamour, and it becomes like, oh, you start to see the ugliness of them chasing this, the endless summer or whatever. And that's kind of where I saw the similarities with Gene Mulvihill, where he's like opening Action Park. It's like, oh, this is endless summer. It's just about fun. We don't need the rules. We should be able to be free. But then it's sort of glossing over the people that were hurt and killed because of that. And it's sort of the same with Bodhi.
Yeah, and these are like themes that I'm sort of obsessed with, and like every movie I've ever made thus far sort of litigates. Like Class Action Park and How to Rob a Bank are both kind of about the same thing to me, which is, I say, the promise and peril of living a life without rules, of just doing whatever the hell you want and not caring about anybody else, and how appealing that is to us as humans on a very primal level, but also the consequences, what happens when we actually set out to do that. And, I think there is a little Gene Mulvihill in Bodhi as well, especially in that Gene seemed to have a philosophy of life. He seemed to, at least he thought he had it all kind of figured out and didn't understand why other people so foolishly went along with the rules and the norms of society, why other people decide they needed to buy insurance, why other people decide they need to, do things the normal way.
Obey state law.
Obey state laws. And there is something so perversely, I think, appealing to us as humans of this idea of just saying, why do I have to? What if I didn't? What if I didn't do that? What if I just said no and did my own thing? And I think we all kind of have fantasies of disappearing. I'm going to stop paying my mortgage, stop paying my rent, stop going to school, stop dealing with people, stop taking care of people. What happens then, though? That's sort of the question.
I think that's another. Oh, sorry, Dave.
Oh no, I was just say with Bodhi, like it also brings out kind of this selfishness. Like I hung out with a lot of punks back in my day, and there's all the anarchy punks, and like there's this. Like when you run into a punk who's just like, hey man, what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. It's like, yeah, but you don't have anything. And so you're drinking all my beer. Like where it's like that philosophy is often applied to people who are just like, get out of my ass. you leech. And so like, there's a little of that where like, it's a very romantic idea. And then you see the toll it's taking on the people around him, where like at that last bank robbery where it's like, the masks literally come off, and you see that it's Bodhi. Like it's all falling apart, and he's lost his coolness completely. He's just freaking out.
Poor dumb Gromit pays the price.
Gromit.
Yeah, I wanted to say like
all these movies.
Sorry.
Yeah, the Gromit character I'm reminded of like Face Off, where there's always like the younger brother type character who really kind of creates that crisis for the leader. But I'm sorry, go on. Yeah.
The Pollux Troy. No, I would say, I think maybe another reason this film resonates, at least it does with me, is like it's such a like it's kind of heartbreaking, right? The tragedy of it, because it's something we all feel. We all daydream about being free and realize that these rules kind of suck and they don't make any sense, and a lot of the things we do are just about as people are just creating ways to oppress each other. But at the same time, we know like we're too far into this now, so like it's impossible to do what Bodhi's doing. We can't
there's
do
nothing
it.
We can do about
there's too many casualties as a result of it.
Yeah.
So it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. You're like, oh, I want to do that, but it's impossible. Sorry.
And that was very much like one of the things I became sort of obsessed with trying to understand with How to Rob a Bank was what happens to people and those close to them when you decide to do this. And I think sort of the biggest surprise and revelation to me was that, we talk about bank robbery as this victimless crime. That's why it's so romantic. Why it has this, its place in the American mythos or the Robin Hood stories, whatever it is, because you can sort of say, the banks fuck the banks. Who cares about the banks? Or the insurance companies who insure the banks. In the movie, Swayze is like, it's insured. It's not worth dying for. But what happens when people cross that Rubicon and start living this double life, we found it was so surprising. Like one of the victims, it turns out, kind of is yourself, to kind of sound a little tropey and trite about it. Scott Scurlock, the Hollywood bandit who How to Rob a Bank was about, was somebody who basically, through movies like Point Break, through stories like Robin Hood, was able to tell himself the story that this is fun. There's no victims. I get the money. I take down the man in my own way. I get to have a good time. It's an adrenaline rush. What could go wrong? As long as I'm smart about it, right? As long as I don't use my gun. But the deeper and deeper he got into it, and as he robbed so many banks, he had to cut off all personal relationships. He had to cut off ties to friends and family. He couldn't get close to somebody, romantic or otherwise. And it became a very, very isolating life. And in order to sort of escape that, he kind of had to do that trope of tropes, that one last score, which the minute you're actually telling yourself this is that one last score, you probably should stop what you're doing. Because has there ever been a movie where that one last score has worked out well? I've never seen it.
That is a cursed phrase.
Yeah, it's cursed.
Yeah.
The second you're like, all right, guys, this is it. Like, they literally are like, their plan was to hit 3 to 4 banks in one night, walk away with $10 to $15 million. Each goes their own way and live their best lives. But like the second you start saying, this is it, guys, one more and we're out, you should probably be out before that.
Yep. Oh, again, bring it back to playing poker. When you know it's your last hand, you tend to go all in because you're like, screw it, one more.
Screw it. YOLO. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the same with this, where that moment where Patrick Swayze says, go for the vault, you realize, because he's realizing, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this guy knows who I am. It's either
this is the last time I can do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I might as well. I better get it all.
His crewmates are like, we have to stop. He's like, no, it's never about money. It's about us showing the world that there's another way, which is really like a bad excuse for what he's about to do. By robbing this one less bank, we have to show the world that there's another way to live their life. I think it's like, disappearing and getting away with it would probably be a more effective way of sending that message.
It's also about, if you're robbing a bank with someone, they say it's not about the money. You go like, no, it is about, I'm good. I'm leaving.
It's about
the money.
I think I need to find a new gang. I think I should find a new gang.
Yeah. If I'm in a gang with people who it's not performance art, like if you're in a gang who thinks that like we're trying to make a statement here, it's like, really, like get with another gang. That gang is not long for this world.
Oh, my bad. I thought this is bank robbers. Oh, we are bank robbers?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm out. Whatever you guys are talking about, I don't know what this is.
Oh, great. It's Bodhi and the Joker, and it's just like, neither works out. You don't want to work with either of these people.
No, honestly.
No.
They leave Roach in the desert.
Yeah. That is all right.
I love that shot. It's like a David Lean shot.
Yeah, there's something to me that's so inherently funny about dying while skydiving, and it's not from the skydiving. Just like, I don't know, there's something funny to me about a corpse with a parachute on it, and that parachute just dragging him around, and like, I can't quite put my finger on it. It's just funny to me.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
It's kind of ironic in a weird way.
Yeah, it's a funny way to die.
It's not the ground that killed you. It's something else that killed you.
Right. Yeah. It's just you died in the air while skydiving,
clutching a bag of money,
doing what he loved.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Doing what he loved. Yeah.
Yeah, they make it. It's part of it. All of his accomplices just die in these like. I mean, the first guy just dies in the bank. The other one, Gary Busey gets. Yeah. And they're all like so like undignified, and it feels like kind of drawn out in a way where you're seeing the consequences. Like it's really, I don't know. It's a really good way to show that.
I think that's why this used to bug me because it felt too cruel. But I think that's why Gary Busey has to get killed in this sequence. Like we really have to, because we don't care about the bank robbers really. Like we as an audience. But so it's like I think that was necessary just to really drive the consequence home. Yeah,
it reminds me of something like
and
No Country for Old Men.
Make you hate Bodhi more than we did.
Like No Country for Old Men is one where it's like, I always like it when a movie shows death as like, it's not necessarily that heroic, it just sort of is.
It just kind of happens.
And it's not
but
like,
it's the Sam Elliott role in Roadhouse. It's like the mentor. The mentor always has to die on page 90. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's whatever. I think it's probably in like Joseph Campbell's Hero Journey books. It's like, the mentor's got to die. Mentor's got to die so that there's no more cushion, right? There's no one else to lean on, and also you have to get revenge. Yeah.
It's funny framing him as the mentor because it's
Yeah.
I guess that's technically what he is, but like again,
Right.
Gary
Well, he
Busey
shows
is
him what's
so
going to
good.
happen to him, right? Because like Gary
Yeah.
Busey's burnt out because like McGinley's a piece of shit to him. Everybody
Right.
treats him like a joke. So it's like, this is what you got to look forward to. You'll give this place 25 years of your life and nobody will treat you with any amount of dignity.
I love how Gary Busey, my favorite part is when they're trying to get hair. And it's like, okay, how does Keanu get hair? He acts like a stoner. He uses himself. So does Gary Busey by just running up and going like, I'm going to take your hair. And then grabbing his hair and running. And it's
He
like,
does show,
I
he
guess
flashes his badge real quick, which has
Yeah.
always been funny to me because how bewildering
give a
must that
fuck.
have been for that guy?
yeah.
Especially if you're like a little stoned, you're a surfer bra, you know, and there's something like there's no more. Name a more frightening person to jump on you on the beach and demand your hair than
Yeah.
Gary Busey.
While you're high. Oh
the
my
hair.
God.
Maybe Jake Busey.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe Nick Nolte. Maybe. But like Gary Busey, like top 3 scariest individuals to jump on you on a beach and start cutting your hair. You're going to tell your friends and they will not believe you when
No.
you say that too.
He would
They
tell
might
you that
a
too.
little bit.
Nobody's ever going to believe
Yeah.
you.
Exactly. Just go full Bill Murray for it. Like that's
Yeah.
what I would have done. It's just cut the hair. Nobody's ever going to believe you. Run off. It's like,
Yeah.
what just happened?
God, what a hero.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any else.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to just express about Point Break? It's hard
The
to talk about this
ratitude
film.
of Point Break.
Yeah, because it's such a.
Well, I mean, what Bigelow really brought to this movie, I think, like, can't be overstated.
Oh,
like, this is a
yeah.
movie that, it's an amazing script, as we said, but in somebody else's hands, it wouldn't have come off as the art it is,
Yeah.
is the truth. I think this isn't an original thought on my end. I'm sure many articles or podcasts have used the idea, have expressed the idea that she really shot this movie through sort of the female gaze. But it's true.
Yeah.
This is a movie that is sort of obsessed with the beauty of her characters, her men, in a way that is not as like homoerotic as a Top Gun or anything like that. It's very loving, and it's very much grounded in the love they have between each other in a way that's very, at its core, sweet and relatable. And it doesn't come off as corny in a way, again, like the sort of subtle homoeroticism of other 80s action movies does.
Yeah, like Top Gun, like you mentioned. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Like she does ground it, and also like you're right. She films them, like you said, it's almost mythological. I think earlier, like she films them like Greek gods, really.
Right. And
Yeah.
again, she also avoids male gaze stuff. The naked women in the house are never shot gratuitously.
No, it's you never really. Yeah,
And she
she's
uses the
beating the
fact
shit
that
out
you're
of
not
people.
thinking about them to have her just attack people. Yeah, it's a great use of that trope. Like it feels very fresh. Yeah, and I don't know. For me, like the biggest, it's not revelation, but like again, this is a movie you watch with friends. You hang out. You don't think about it that much. Watching it and really thinking about it and thinking about how efficiently it is made and how like every scene has some sort of conflict, and those conflicts push everything along and tell you about the characters. It's just so efficient.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's also say, like, if you're going to watch a movie and inspire to be a bank robber, as Scott Skurlock did, there are so many things. In this recent rewatch this morning, which I did, I was just writing down all of the sort of step-by-steps this movie gives you that he ended up doing that sort of pan out. Like, this idea that, like, don't take the vaults lightly. Like, don't go into the vault till you know what the heck you're doing, right? Wipe down your car, get a drop car, a switch car, right? So you leave the bank in one car, you drop it off somewhere and you get into another car. So you're not in a car where people saw you driving away the bank from, and make sure that the switch car is wiped down clean, because you're kind of putting it there as evidence that the police and FBI are going to collect, and make sure there's nothing in there to incriminate you. And, Scott and his friends, they'd wipe down everything with like mineral spirits, and then they'd leave female hair and like other people's hairs in the car as a way of really messing with them. So it all comes back to the hair, I guess.
Yeah. So Gary Busey can't get them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's the hair expert of the FBI.
Yeah.
Also, what does diving for bricks in a pool have to do with being a special agent? Exactly.
I love that scene.
I love that he just jumps into the water like an asshole at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where they're sort of playing with the idea of that, like, when you go to see like an action movie or a cop movie in that era, you expect this like ridiculous stuff. And this movie is sort of winking to the fact that it is ridiculous. Like, we're going to show you this thing because it's kind of cool. This has absolutely nothing to do with what these guys would have to do, though. And I love, like, it's a very knowing movie without being glib about it, too.
Right.
Yeah, it never feels like it's winking at you, yeah.
It's a water thing, too, right? Versus surfing, where it's like we're making you do this thing that's very, like... I think the water helps, and it's very, like... It's very bureaucratic, right? Which is like, what does this have to do with anything? And it's like, well, this is what we do. You know, like someone a long time ago probably decided that this is how we train people.
These rules make no sense, and yet we follow them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it works really well for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great movie, guys.
Perfect film.
Just such a treat. Perfect film. I mean, like, is there anything you're watching this movie? Is there anything, you know, given a couple decades of hindsight, you would change? Because I honestly can't think of anything. I think it's an amazing movie.
I would have more throwing dogs at people.
Yeah, at least two more.
That was a real dog they threw too. That's like the best thing, and you can tell. Like, you're like, I mean, the dog was fine, didn't get hurt. Yeah. You know, it was the dog. He was trained to be thrown, but it's kind of amazing. Like, even those little things where it's sort of like having Patrick Swayze do his own skydiving. These things that are in these quick cuts that really make it all feel way more real. Because how many movies have you seen where it's a rubber dog and they throw it, or a rubber baby is being thrown? Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's having trouble throwing it. It's this big beefy guy,
a big dog,
and it's like I love that the dog's down. The dog's just like, oh yeah, I see what you were doing. Yeah, throw me.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this.
He's Martin Short in Arrested Development. Yeah, that's
yes.
Throw me, dragon. Just something the body does when it's shaken.
I love that sequence also because they're using this idea that they're going through all these houses and stuff, and it's like every house you can tell a little story, you can have a little chaos. I don't know. That's to me is like the key to action movies is like, or action where it's
that
like
foot chase is awesome.
Just escalate and go in the house. Use every part of this. What's that?
Yeah, it's a really like it's like a Buster Keaton sequence almost, where you have these like opportunities for these mini episodic pieces of physical comedy or action, but also like, you know, the people in the house aren't like, he went that way. They're just as scared of Keanu as they are of the guy he's chasing.
Get the hell out of here! Yeah,
they have no. Yeah, they don't know who you are, why you're in the house. And I think some lesser movies, they kind of have this thing where the people whose house is being run through instantly know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is and start pointing out and helping him out. And it's like, if you're in a house and two people are running through it with guns, you don't care who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. You just want them out of there. Yeah.
It's a fantastic sequence.
I think I might have been more comfortable with the guy in the Reagan mask, because at least I recognize Reagan.
Right.
Oh, exactly.
It's like, oh, Mr. President, thank God, there's a man with a gun in here.
I want one person in the bank
to just think he's really Ronald Reagan.
That was like, there was a sketch we were going to do at Crack that I really wanted to do, which is people robbing the bank dressed as presidents, and one of them is really methoding it, which they kind of do here. Like someone's doing Nixon, but the idea is someone's way more into being like Lincoln than they are robbing the bank.
I mean, what you're just giving me a great idea for a screenplay about an actual ex-president who puts together a gang who wears other ex-presidents' masks.
That's a good idea.
It's the perfect alibi. Nobody would ever.
Yep. No one would think Jimmy Carter is robbing banks.
Yeah.
And Carter's 11.
Oh my goodness! If Jimmy Carter started robbing banks like tomorrow, I would make a documentary about.
Oh
that.
yeah,
that would be pretty cool.
I feel like everybody would let him, right? Like I feel like if Jimmy Carter went to a bank and said, "I just need to get into the vault,"
right? He could just make a finger gun and be like, "Give me the money," and they'd be like, "Sure thing, Mr. Carter.
Yeah.
You've
it's
earned
for
it.
Habitat for Humanity. I promise.
I'm going to use it to build a house for Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, I'm going to use it to build a house. No, and the bank robbery scenes are great in this movie, and they're like they're not. They're grounded, but just like the right kind of stylized. Like you have like the money kind of slowly floating to the ground. There's a lot of screaming, though. I mean, there's a lot of chaos in this movie. Like you mentioned the scenes where they're running through the houses, the scenes when they're kind of invading the Nazi surfer's house. Some of the bank robbery scenes, it's people screaming over each other. You can't necessarily hear what they're saying. And I think this movie uses chaos and order really interestingly and really well, which, thinking about this now in real time is probably not, an accent. You start thinking about like the FBI being this avatar of order, and Bodhi's character and Bodhi's sort of ideals being chaotic neutral or chaotic good, even in the way the movie's presented.
Yeah. It's a great film.
Yeah.
Great film, guys. Yeah.
Oh man, do we have any final thoughts? I feel like we've.
Well, one thing's coming to mind right now. I'm just looking at some of the quotes I wrote down. I didn't piece this together. There's a great line from Bodhi where he's talking about how to rob a bank. Is basically, he says, it's basic dog psychology. If you scare them and get them peeing down their leg, they submit. But if you project weakness, that promotes violence, and that's how people get hurt. Peace through superior firepower. And that's after a dog is thrown at him.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, in the universe of this film, is he just basically telling, like, you know, Keanu is like, listen, man, you threw a dog at me. You got the whole dog thing wrong, you know? Dogs aren't weapons. I don't know.
God, it really does remind me of Fight Club the more we too, because there's that whole thing about the psychology of like people will do anything to avoid being in a fight.
Yeah.
Which is that idea of like it's this enlightened violence where it's like we're doing these things using human nature to basically saying like, well, there won't be violence if we do this, if we embrace it in this way, or it's not really like it's not mean.
It's funny you say that. Like, just last week, I actually interviewed Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club, for a movie I'm working on right now.
Oh, nice.
And so we were talking about the two things that really jump out to me after watching Point Break from, like, our conversation from Fight Club. Once, like, him talking about it, and this is way more present in the book than the movie, a big theme being this idea about you go down this path that's ordained by somebody else. You're trying to live out somebody else's dream, and you don't get fulfillment from it. What do you do? And that is certainly like a speech Keanu gives in this film. And that's certainly a huge part of what Fight Club is. But then the other thing you're saying is the scene in the movie and also the book where they're sort of ordered to start a fight with somebody else. And those scenes play out very, very differently in the book and the movie. In the movie, it's almost like you're just attacking somebody. In the book, the whole point was to let that other person win. And that victory would be a gift to them that would give them enlightenment. So you're not supposed to win. You're supposed to start a fight and then let that person beat the crap out of you, which is very interesting and different, and a little bit, I think, more. You know, if Point Break is a movie about seeking enlightenment, a little bit more along the lines of that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Man,
so
I'm gonna rewatch Fight Club now.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Gotta rewatch Fight Club.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
This was great.
Yeah.
Thank you for
it was a great time.
having us do Point Break.
Which we somehow hadn't covered before.
Yeah, I
Strange.
just assumed we had. We'll have to do the 2015 one next.
Yeah, we got to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for joining us. I really enjoyed How to Rob a Bank. I really liked how you told the story. I love the storyboard stuff. I didn't expect, because I went into it completely like blind. I really like that you tell you tell both sides from the beginning. Like, there's never a reveal of who this person is. Like, and just following it from the bank robbers and from the cops, kind of evenly, and like, I don't know. It was a fascinating story. Really, really good documentary. Everybody should check that out.
That was sort of the idea, is how can we make a documentary feel like you're watching a 90s action movie, particularly a 90s action movie like Point Break that is shot from the perspective of the robbers, kind of, where you begin to, if not root for, at least understand and empathize with them and understand who these people are and why they did it, and then, of course, the horrible consequences of what they did.
I really Oh, sorry. Yeah, I like that. I like, that there's like difference of opinions of what happened between them and the cops, and the cops and the other cops. Like, there's like a little bit of infighting. That was very fun. Yeah, really good. Did you rob a bank as preparation to like get into the mind
method documentary filmmaker? No, I make documentaries about people who do things like that, so I don't have to do them myself.
That's fair.
You know, it's vicarious bank robbery, I think. But I can tell you exactly how to rob a bank now. I mean, it's the 1990s, which it's not. Yeah, so.
I know. I was taking notes, and then I was like, "Damn!
Oh, no, this will work now."
The same now.
No, this will work now.
Banks now, it's just like, I feel like if you go in a bank now and you're like, "This is a stick up," they're like, "That's adorable."
Yeah,
we were just gonna press.
That's
this
adorable.
button.
We've got $40 in this bank. Get a credit card. You know, like
everybody come to the ATM with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there anything else? I mean, everybody should check out How to Rob a Bank on Netflix.
For sure. And
Class Action Park
on Max. Anything else you wanted to plug or mention?
Yeah, any socials, anywhere people can follow you?
Yeah, I'm going to plug my book. I had a book come out in September that I actually wrote with my dad, who's a neuroscientist, about the human nervous system and trauma.
Oh, wow.
It's called Our Polyvagal World, How Safety and Trauma Change Us, by Seth Porges and Stephen Porges. So that's just like kind of left field plug right there. So hope people check it out if they're interested in how trauma changes your body and your mind.
Yeah.
I think this audience would be, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Cool. I'll quickly plug our Patreon, patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. Check it out. We have exclusive podcasts. We watch movies every Friday night. We have absolutely watched Point Break on our movie nights, right?
Definitely. I don't think we've done the 2015 one. But
no.
Anyway, we also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where you can find a link to our Teespring store that has all kinds of cool original artwork and designs. You can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So check that out. Slap your little ex-president peepers onto that.
And I think we can all say, go rob a bank. Hey, listen, our music is produced by Chris Corlew. You can find him on twitter.com as the Corlew or go to shipwreckedsailor.bandcamp.com. Our channel artwork is produced by Michael Vincent Bramley. For more of his work, go to mvbramley.art. Our episode artwork is by Justin Brown, available on Twitter as Justin T. Brown or at artnessbyjustinbrown.com. And finally, additional artwork is by Starlene Hodge. You can find her work at starlenearts.com or on Twitter as StarleneX. Cool. Goodbye.